In this video, I'm going to illustrate some of the commonly used analytical tools in Excel, namely the GoSeek function and the data table. To illustrate them, I put together this very simple two-stage dividend discount model and use it to estimate the value of a share of a company's common stock using a two-stage growth model. In this model, in the input area, as you can see, we have some assumptions about the changes in the future dividend payments. It starts with a 5-year constant growth rate for the first stage, or we call the short-term growth rate here, and it also assumes a long-term growth rate, constant growth rate, for the second stage after 5 years. Then it computes the future dividend payments explicitly for each of the years in the first stage and calculates the terminal value at the end of the first stage. It sums up the future cash flows and computes the discounted values of the future cash flows. The stock value, which is the output of this model, is the sum of the present value of each of the future cash flows. So now we've got the spreadsheet set up. Let's see what kind of question we can answer with it. We might be interested in finding out what long-term growth rate would be consistent with a certain level of the stock value, say at $70. So we can first try this with manually change our input of the long-term growth rate, say by increase it to be 4%. So we see the increase in the stock value. However, it's not high enough, so we have to increase it a little bit more. Let's say increase it to 5%. Now that's pretty close. But there is a faster way to do that by using the GoSeek function in Excel. To bring up the GoSeek function, we can click on the Data tab in Excel and go to this Data toolbox and click on this What If Analysis icon and select GoSeek function. It brings up a little dialog window with 3 boxes. Okay. The first box asks you in which cell you are trying to find the value for, and in this case we're trying to find the value of the stock. So we put the location or the address of this cell in the first box, and we want to set the value to be $70 by changing our assumption about the long-term growth rate. So we enter the address in the third box here. Click on OK. So you can see we can find the value of the stock to be $70 per share with the long-term growth rate at a little bit more than 5%. Now let's try that with a different value, say $100. We can repeat the whole process by click on the GoSeek function, and again by setting the cell, the output of the model to be $100 and by changing the cell of the input, which is the long-term growth rate, and now you see Excel has calculated the appropriate corresponding long-term growth rate for the stock value at $100 per share. So if you are trying to assess what change in the input value would lead to a certain value of the output, we can do that one by one by using the go-seek function. Now let's see if we can do this a little bit further. What if we want to see how the value varies with the change in the growth rate? And we want to change the growth rate with the increment, say, at 0.5%. Now we can use something called data table in Excel. To do a data table, in this case, a one-way data table, which means we have one changing variable that has the changes in the input, we can first create a column of input to the data table. Let's say start from 2.5% with an increment to 3%, and after enter the two inputs, I can use the autofill feature in Excel to have a range of potential values for the growth rate. This column, what we just created, it would be the input for the data table. And we're going to put here the output of the data table linked to the value computed from the above model here, set it to be equal to the output of the model. And we're going to name it as the stock value. So now we can highlight the whole thing, starting from the linking cell and down to the 7% of the growth rate, the maximum value of the growth rate, and then click on Data tab and the Data Table function. And in this dialog window, what we are going to use are the inputs here in this column, which are the potential values for the long-term growth rate. So we are going to use this column input cell, and the values here in this column should be applied as the potential value to the long-term growth rate. So we are going to click on this long-term growth rate input cell, click on OK. So we got all the values here. Now we can format this column of stock value nicely by go to the Home tab by choosing the currency. In this data table, so it allows us to easily assess the potential changes in the stock value corresponding to the changes in the assumption about the long-term growth rate in this column.